Okay, in this final podcast, we will look at the collapse of communism in the Soviet Union. Um, Mikhail Gorbachev was a very popular Soviet leader in the West. He was seen as the man that had seen out the end of the Cold War. This peacemaker who had done a deal with the Americans to reduce the number of nuclear weapons. He'd withdrawn Soviet forces from Afghanistan. He had overseen the revolutions of 1989 in Eastern Europe. However, back at home, Gorbachev was in many ways a hated person. He was hated by those people who felt that his reforms were moving too slowly, those policies of glasnost and perestroika, and he was also hated on the other side by the hardline communists who felt that he had betrayed all that had come before him since 1917. And so what we see in the summer of 1991, while Gorbachev is away on holiday, there is a coup. That's a COUP, a coup, which means there is an attempted overthrow by some hardline communist leaders. They were known as the Gang of Eight, and their intention is to reverse the policies in the Soviet Union, to reintroduce hardline communist policies, and to make the Soviet Union, in their eyes, a stronger country for it. However, they've grossly miscalculated the kind of opposition that they were going to face. People take to the streets. They rally around the Russian president. Of course, Russia is the biggest of all the Soviet republics, and the Russian president is a man called Boris Yeltsin. And Yeltsin very astutely claims this coup to be illegal in the eyes of the communist constitution, and he sees to it that Gorbachev is rerouted back from his house arrest in his holiday retreat and brought back to Moscow immediately. So Yeltsin is seen very much as the saviour of this situation. The coup collapses after only 3 or 4 days, and Gorbachev is back in power. However, Gorbachev, after this attempted overthrow, is a very much a shadow of his former self, both in the eyes of the politicians around him, but also in the eyes of the public, where his reputation was already quite damaged anyway. Gorbachev tries to ameliorate different sides, different warring factions. Of course, now that the far left have been removed in this coup, he proposes a new constitution for the Soviet Union, whereby the republics have even more autonomy in places like the Ukraine. The Baltic states, Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, had already stated their intentions to become independent of the Soviet Union, and so in many ways he's kind of like a dog walker in the park with lots of different dogs. You can imagine all the Soviet republics now frantically trying to get away. He's not really having much luck keeping the whole thing together. Yeltsin now is the rising star, and really by the end of 1991 there's very little Gorbachev can do apart from announce the dissolution of his own position as party secretary or as president of the Soviet Union, which he does so. And on the 25th of December 1991, the hammer and sickle flag, the red hammer and sickle flag of the Soviet Union, is lowered from the Kremlin for the last time, and it is replaced by the flag of Russia. And really, it's at that point that marks the end of the Cold War, because with the removal and the collapse of the Soviet Union, its replacement with a loosely kind of confederation, it's known as the Commonwealth of Independent States, but really by now these countries are all independent like they are today. There is only one superpower left in the world, and that is the United States. President Bush, who is the US president who oversees the collapse and the end of the collapse of the Soviet Union, the Cold War, actually he felt that the Cold War ended in 1989. However, the USSR carries on for another 18 months, 2 years, and really it's not until the 25th of December 1991 that the Cold War finally comes to an end. So there we have it. GCSE Unit 1, 1943 to 1991, the era of the Cold War. Good luck with your revision. There'll be one final podcast on exam technique. Yeah, there we go.